I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing violently on the nightstand. At first, I thought it was a nightmare. I had been dreaming about my father again, but when I reached for the screen, my heart nearly stopped. 27 missed calls. 27. All from a number I hadn't seen in years. The number registered under his name, Dad. My father had been dead for over a decade. Everyone in my life knew it, including me. Yet there it was, staring back at me in cold digital letters. I tried to shake it off as some sick prank or a technical glitch, but a gnawing unease twisted inside me. My hands shook as I pressed the screen, hoping somehow, impossibly, for it all to be a mistake. No voicemail. No messages. Just the calls. Repeated, unrelenting, demanding attention. My apartment, normally so quiet in the early hours, felt suffocating. Shadows in the corners seemed to stretch, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for me to react. I thought back to the last time I had spoken to him, or rather, the last time I had remembered speaking to him. I was a child, no more than 10, sitting by his hospital bed while he whispered something I hadn't understood at the time. Something about secrets, about waiting, about me. I had dismissed it as a fevered ramble of a dying man. Now, with these calls, that memory clawed its way back, sharper, more urgent. The logical part of me screamed, "It's impossible." But another part, a deeper, more instinctive part, told me that maybe, just maybe, this was real. That something buried in the past was trying to reach me, something my father had left unfinished, something I had to find before it was too late. I stared at the screen again. The time was 6:03 a.m. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. I had to make a choice, ignore it, pretend it was a cruel joke, or answer. Something inside me knew that if I didn't answer, I might never get another chance. Slowly, trembling, I tapped the green icon. A dial tone. Then silence. My stomach dropped. Nothing but the quiet hum of my apartment, as though the world had paused to watch me make my next move. And then, a whisper. Soft, almost inaudible, coming from the phone speaker. "Clara. You have to find it." I froze. My father's voice, or something eerily like it, had spoken my name. My mind spun. Find what? Where? How is this possible? I didn't know what was real anymore, but one thing was certain. My life as I knew it had ended that morning. Something had returned from the past, something that would force me to uncover secrets I had spent years trying to forget. And as I sat there, staring at the phone, another question formed in my mind. Who else knows? And who else is watching me? After that impossible morning, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying the whisper, "Clara. You have to find it." My apartment felt smaller, suffocating, as though the walls themselves were pressing in. I needed answers, or at least a thread to follow. I went straight to my father's study, a room I hadn't entered in years. Dust coated the shelves, and the air smelled of old paper and forgotten memories. As I rifled through his belongings, I found a small, worn notebook, tucked behind a row of encyclopedias. It wasn't labeled, but I instinctively knew this was the beginning of something. The notebook was filled with scribbles, diagrams, and dates that didn't seem to make sense. One page, however, caught my eye, a series of names, some crossed out, some circled in red. Next to one of the circled names, a single word, "Watch." A chill ran down my spine. Was this a warning? Or a clue? My father's handwriting was unmistakable, sharp, urgent, sometimes frantic. There were references to places I had never heard of, and hints at people I didn't recognize. One name repeated more than once, Evelyn. Then I noticed a folded piece of paper pressed between the pages. Carefully, I opened it. It was a short message, written in a hurried scrawl. "Clara, if you're reading this, it means they've started moving again. You must follow the trail, but trust no one fully. The truth is closer than you think, and danger is always near." I sank into the chair, heart racing. They? Who had started moving again? My mind jumped to the 27 calls. Could someone be orchestrating all of this? And why now, after so many years? I picked up my phone, half expecting another call, but it remained silent. The tension in the room was unbearable. I needed to act, but I also needed caution. Somewhere in my father's notes was a thread I could follow, a path that would lead me closer to the truth, and possibly closer to danger. I decided to start with the name that appeared most, Evelyn. I searched online, but only found scattered mentions. A few news articles from over a decade ago, a photograph in a local archive, nothing concrete. Yet, something about her presence in my father's notebook felt ominous. And then, tucked in the very last page of the notebook, I found a key. Small, old, rusted, but definitely real. Attached was a tiny note: "The lock opens the first door. Begin." I had no idea what it meant. A door? Where? And why did my father leave me a key after all these years? My fingers trembled as I held it, realizing that this was no longer just a mystery. It was a trail my father had left me, deliberately, for a reason I didn't yet understand. And as I looked out the window, the morning light filtering into the dusty room, I had a sinking feeling: someone else was watching me. The key burned cold in my palm as I left the apartment, the city streets strangely quiet that morning. Every instinct screamed that I wasn't alone, but I couldn't stop now. I had to follow my father's trail, starting with Evelyn. But first, I needed to understand what the first door meant. Hours later, I found myself standing before a small, abandoned storage room my father had rented years ago. Dust-covered boxes lined the walls, and the air smelled of mildew and old leather. I inserted the key into a lock that had clearly not been touched in years. It clicked open. My hands trembled as I pushed the door inward, revealing a cramped, shadow-filled room. There, hidden beneath a pile of old newspapers, was a thick, leather-bound journal, its cover cracked, the pages yellowed. I flipped it open, and immediately I felt it. This was my father's voice, preserved in ink, speaking to me across time. The journal wasn't just memories. It was a map of secrets, a trail of coded messages and hidden meetings. There were names I recognized, and some I didn't. Evelyn's name appeared again and again. But now it was paired with another, Simon. Who was Simon? And why had my father warned me about him indirectly in the notebook? As I read, one entry froze me. "They are closer than ever. I can't trust anyone, not even those I love most. If I am gone, the key and this journal will guide Clara. She must understand, and she must act before it's too late." My heart pounded. Gone? My father knew he wouldn't be around. Was he talking about his death years ago, or something else entirely? Then, tucked between the pages, I found a photograph: Evelyn and my father, laughing in a garden I didn't recognize. But what made my blood run cold was the figure in the background, Simon. His face was partially obscured, but there was something familiar, something threatening in the way he watched them. I realized I was holding more than a journal. I was holding a warning. And a puzzle I couldn't yet solve. Someone had orchestrated this all before I was even aware, leaving breadcrumbs to lead me to truths that could be dangerous, even deadly. I looked around the dusty storage room, shadows stretching across the walls. Somewhere out there, someone was waiting for me to take the next step. And I knew, whatever was coming next, I couldn't ignore it. The storage room's door clicked shut behind me, and I carried the journal back to my apartment, every step heavy with unease. Evelyn and Simon. The names haunted me. I had to know who they were, what role they had played in my father's life, and why he had entrusted me with this cryptic trail. I started with my father's old contacts, people he had once called friends. Some were unreachable, others evasive when I asked about him. One name kept surfacing: Martin Hawthorne, a man who had been my father's business partner before his sudden death. I drove to his office downtown, a modern building that looked too polished to hide any secrets. Martin's expression changed the moment he saw the journal in my hands. His eyes flicked to it, a shadow of recognition passing over his face. "Clara, I wasn't expecting you," he said cautiously. "You shouldn't be looking into this." "Looking into what?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. "I found my father's notebook. His journal. I need answers, Martin." He hesitated, then sighed. "Your father. He was involved in things you can't imagine. He discovered something dangerous. Evelyn and Simon, they weren't just acquaintances. They were part of it. And when he tried to stop them, things went wrong." I felt a chill crawl down my spine. Went wrong how? Martin leaned closer, lowering his voice. He knew he wouldn't survive whatever came next. That's why he left you the key and the journal. He wanted you to finish what he started. Or at least uncover the truth. But Clara, be warned, you're not the only one following this trail. Someone has been watching you since the calls began. The room felt colder. My father's warnings echoed in my mind. Watching me? Simon? Evelyn? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Martin shook his head. I don't know. But someone knows you've started reading the journal. And they won't stop. As I left Martin's office, the city felt different, darker, almost oppressive. I knew I was being followed. Every reflection in the windows, every shadow on the sidewalk, made my pulse quicken. Yet the journal called me forward, promising answers, threatening more danger. And then I remembered a single phrase from the note: the truth is closer than you think, and danger is always near. I glanced at the streets around me, wondering who was watching. And for the first time, I realized that uncovering my father's secrets might cost more than I had ever imagined. Perhaps even my life. I returned to my apartment that evening, the journal clutched tightly in my hands. Every step I took felt heavier, as though the weight of the secrets I carried was pressing down on me. The key, the notebook, the faces of Evelyn and Simon. All of it had led me here, to the edge of something I wasn't sure I could survive. I traced the locations mentioned in the journal, each place more desolate and secretive than the last. Finally, I arrived at an old, abandoned warehouse at the edge of the city. It was the place my father had marked as the first door. My pulse thundered in my ears as I inserted the key into the lock. The door groaned open, revealing a narrow stairway descending into darkness. Inside, the air was thick, damp, and alive with shadows. I could hear faint whispers echoing through the walls, but there was no one there, or so I thought. Following the stairs, I reached a small, hidden room filled with papers, photographs, and old recordings. Everything pointed to one horrifying truth: my father hadn't died in a simple accident. He had been silenced. Someone had wanted him gone. I picked up a recording device, hesitated, and pressed play. My father's voice filled the room, trembling but determined. Clara, if you are listening, it means they succeeded in covering the truth, but not completely. Evelyn and Simon. They betrayed everyone. Trust no one. The final piece is in the location they least expect. Beware, my daughter, danger is closer than you think. My stomach dropped. I had finally understood the betrayal, but the warning made my heart race. Whoever had killed him, or orchestrated his death, was still out there, waiting for me to make a mistake. And now, with the journal and the key, I was following a path that could lead straight into their hands. I knew what I had to do. The pieces of the puzzle were almost complete, but one last step remained. I had to confront Evelyn, find Simon, and discover the truth behind the years of lies and the calls that had started it all. My father's voice echoed in my mind: trust no one. As I prepared to leave the warehouse, a shadow shifted in the corner. I froze. Someone had been here, following me. A chill ran down my spine. The truth was finally within reach, but so was the danger I had feared. The warehouse door slammed shut behind me, the echo bouncing off the cold concrete walls. I could feel the weight of every secret, every unanswered question pressing against my chest. The journal, the key, the recordings, they were no longer just objects. They were instruments guiding me toward the truth, and toward danger I could barely imagine. I followed the faint trail my father had left, tracing every clue to a small, secluded house on the outskirts of the city. It was derelict, overgrown with ivy and shadows. Evelyn's name had appeared repeatedly in the journal, each mention marked with a circle or a warning. I had to confront her. I had to know why she had been part of my father's life, and why Simon had always been lurking in the background. The door creaked as I pushed it open. The air inside smelled of damp wood and old secrets. I stepped cautiously into the dimly lit room. On a table in the center, I saw a stack of letters, my father's handwriting unmistakable. Beside them stood Evelyn. She turned slowly, a calm, unsettling smile on her face. "Clara," she said softly, "I've been expecting you." My heart pounded. Why? Why all this? The calls, the journal. Why are you involved? Evelyn's eyes glimmered with something I couldn't read. Your father. He found out too much. He thought he could stop us, but he underestimated the lengths we'd go to protect certain truths. And now, you've come along, carrying his curiosity. I gritted my teeth. What truths? What did you do to him? She stepped closer, almost casually, as though the years of manipulation were nothing more than a game. Your father knew about the project, the people behind it. He tried to expose it, to reveal the corruption, the lies. That's why he was silenced. And you're the final piece in completing what he started. I felt my stomach twist. I'm not part of this. I don't want any part of it. Evelyn's smile faltered for a split second, and then she whispered, almost regretfully, You already are, Clara. Every step you've taken led you here. Every discovery, every call, every clue, it was never random. Your father left a path for you, knowing you'd have to face the same danger he did. Then, the sound of movement behind me made me spin around. Simon stepped out from the shadows, his expression cold, unreadable. And if you fail, Clara, you won't just lose the truth. You'll lose yourself. I realized then that the real reckoning wasn't just about uncovering secrets, it was about surviving them. Every hidden message, every cryptic warning from my father, was a test. And now, the stakes were higher than ever. I remembered the whispered voice from the first morning, the 27 calls, the warnings in the journal. They weren't just warnings, they were instructions. I had to act, but I had no clear path. Evelyn and Simon were waiting for me to falter, to give up, to panic. I took a deep breath, centering myself, and asked the question that had haunted me for years. What did you want from my father? What were you hiding? Evelyn's eyes darkened. Everything he loved, everything he stood for, it threatened us. He was too honest, too careful, too brave. That's why he had to be removed. And now, Clara, you're standing where he once stood. Will you uncover the truth, or will you be swallowed by the shadows? The room seemed to pulse with tension. The letters, the photographs, the whispers of the past, they all converged into a single point of choice. I knew the next steps I took would decide not only what I discovered, but whether I survived the reckoning that had been set in motion the moment I answered those first 27 calls. I clenched the journal tightly, feeling the weight of my father's legacy, and took a step forward. I won't let his death be meaningless. I'll find the truth, no matter the cost. Evelyn and Simon exchanged a glance, one of recognition, one of challenge, and I realized the reckoning had only just begun. Shadows from the past and threats of the present converged, and I understood at last, the truth was never going to be simple. But I was ready to face it. And as the first slivers of dawn crept through the dusty windows, I stepped fully into the legacy my father had left me, the hidden world of secrets, lies, and revelations. A world that was dangerous, terrifying, and finally, mine to uncover.